Welcome to Around the Bases, the pop culture and sports podcast with your host.
Charlie Seymour.
And I'm Tim Sternberg. Hit it, Nick. Wow, we are back for another awesome episode of Around the Bases. Charlie, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Is this the most excited you've ever been to record an episode? Did
Maybe.
something happen out in the
Wait,
world of
what
sports?
were we talking about last week, bro? That might have happened before this next episode.
I I think we nailed it too.
We did. The New York Mets signed Juan Soto to a $165 million contract.
765
Oh,
million.
700 and you mean it wasn't just 165 million?
No, it was
760.
another 600 on top of that number, which is already crazy.
Can you say
15
that
years.
again?
15 years.
15 years, $765 million contract with a $75 million signing bonus. Also, he gets a suite at City Field. That's pretty. That would be enough for me. I don't know. You want me to? I can bet for you,
You know
Mets.
what's great is his contract can celebrate a quinceañera.
Yeah, exactly. I was
15
thinking
years.
that. I was thinking that as you were saying 15 years, that's exactly where I went. I'm like, oh, enough for a 15-year-old. He could have a 15-year-old child in 15 years, and it's crazy. Like, how
Yeah.
awesome is that, though? You got the kid growing up playing baseball, probably a sport he loved, and he ends up playing for the biggest team in New York, the New York Mets.
And they said baseball was dying, huh?
Yeah,
Scoff.
right.
We scoff at that as everyone is saying, I'm going to teach my kids to be a baseball player now.
Let me tell you straight up, bro. When the Dodgers signed Shohei Ohtani last year, I was like, there's no way there's going to be in the next several years someone who's going to make more money than Shohei Ohtani.
And let's not forget that 68 million a year of that is deferred.
Yeah, it's
So
a third.
the present value of that deal is closer to like 460, something like that. It still eclipsed the highest at the time, but I mean, Soto just blows this out of the water.
Well,
Zero deferments in the whole Soto deal.
none.
Not one
Steve
dollar.
Cohen's like, nah, we'll pay you now.
Steve Cohen's like, oh, I'll make that in like a month in the market, pay for his whole 15-year deal.
I read something to do Steve Cohen, who is the man. He literally like bought like two statues worth $285 million. Like that's nothing to him. It's like, and then what did you sent me a text? What did he
I
make
heard
in the stock market?
yeah, like 211 in like 2.5 weeks.
So he
I
made a
heard,
quarter of the money already back.
I heard that they were like around 700 million. They were struggling. So Steve went through his couch cushions and found another 65 million.
It's so true. So the story goes, you sent this to me actually today. Steve Cohen was sitting in a Fort Lauderdale restaurant, literally 10 miles away from where I live right now. And Scott Boras got on the phone and it happened. It happened. He made it happen.
Little
And so
did you
much.
know that the next 15 years of your fandom will be shaped by Steve Cohen sitting 10 miles away from you at the time.
Not
Pretty
crazy.
crazy.
That's insane. I will say, like, I am thrilled. I mean, I've been reading stories all last couple of days. Brandon Nimmo, like, they both have Scott Boras as an agent. Brandon Nimmo reached out to Soto like a couple of days, like a week ago, and said, "I want you to be my teammate." Like, they're full on ready for
Let's
him.
let's talk about that for a second because that brings up a point that I wanted to bring up. The supposed runners up are the Yankees. Now, granted, Soto
Ooh,
said all five teams were in there, competitive up. That's what he was saying. We all know it was down to the Mets and the Yankees. Now, the interesting
100%.
thing you just brought up was you said Nimmo shares an agent, so he reached out to him. You know exactly where I'm going with this because you heard this
Oh,
too.
100%. Yes.
They asked him in the press conference, when was the last time you've spoken to any of your Yankees teammates? He hasn't spoken to a single Yankee
None.
since the World Series. Now, if that
Zero.
information was out there before, I would have changed my guess from 99% Mets and 1% Field. I mean, that's a
100%.
dead giveaway.
I think, I think at the end of the day, the money did speak to him, of course. And I think, I think at the point, though, you get to the point where it's like, okay, we're going to take this. I think culture had a huge part of this decision, the
And
team
family.
culture. Family, Steve Cohen and family. But look at this Mets team over the last year. This Mets team had a very special chemistry that I think Juan Soto is going to fit in perfectly with. I think I have no him and Lindor. I mean, and Pete Alonso, who is going to be signed. I'm saying that right now. Pete Alonso is going to be
Look
signed.
how quickly things chipper up when you nail Soto, right?
I'm like, ready, let's go. Well, you know what? You open up the pocketbook and you prove, and Steve Cohen proved that he's ready to spend. I will tell you, the last couple of years where I was a little not sure that he was really going to open up the pocketbook, so to speak.
Yeah, he
Um,
only had a 300 something million payroll last year.
well, that does help, right? Getting that payroll off. Like you got DeGrom off, the Scherzer off. I mean, not DeGrom, Verlander and Scherzer. That duo is off the payroll. Yeah, it matters, and Bobby
Yeah,
Bonilla's little potatoes. I mean,
Bonilla's going to keep
dude.
getting his payment for another, what, like 12, 13 years, something like that.
Yeah, like Shohei will in the future from the Dodgers when he's long retired, living back home in Japan. Shohei will still be getting a huge check from the
Be
Dodgers.
careful. Shohei is such a freak that who knows how long he could be playing until he's 50.
This is true. I mean, look at Ichiro.
Uh,
Ichiro, I don't know how old was Ichiro when Ichiro retired.
Ichiro was pretty old.
He was up in his late 40s, I think, when he retired. Speaking of which, I cannot wait to see him first round ballot Hall of Famer, 100%. Love Ichiro. Former Marlin. Crazy enough. When the Marlins actually brought good players onto the team and didn't get rid of burgers. But we're going to talk about baseball later. I mean, we wanted to start the show with the Mets, of course.
Yeah, we have to. And I mean, before you jump out of it, I mean, you take this moment and bask in it. I mean, this is historic.
I am. Oh my God, it's so awesome. It is
This,
huge. What was the first thing I said? Because you broke the news to me, of course, because I expected that. When you typed that in the text, I was like, OMG. I literally like I
yeah, as soon as
would have blew
as
your
soon as
ear
you
out
got
if you called me.
as soon as you got the official news, it's like, wow, it's happening.
I, when at that point between you and I mean, I was expecting it at that point. I kind of had a good feeling about it, but you never know. And I remember just all a previous other trades and stuff, and not feeling so confident. And now I say this all to say though, and you'll agree with me. Juan Soto, as incredible as he is one player. We still have a team to put together, the Mets, and
A
I have
team that
full.
a team that did just go to the NLCS
They did, but
and
they some of the
arguably put up a
parts of it
better
are not.
arguably put up
But
a better fight against the Dodgers than the Yankees did, right?
I agree. But I'm just saying part of that NLCS team is currently not solid and booked. So
That's
that's
true,
where I'm a
but
little.
it's also still early. It's still December 12th, 13th as we sit here. So,
I mean, Pete Alonso doesn't hit that home run. I
yeah,
mean,
a
he
lot.
was an important
Lindor on
piece.
the clinching
Yeah,
day.
absolutely.
So here's
And
a
so
good thing. Here's a good thing to look at it from Soto's perspective. He sees the Mets. They put up a better fight against the Dodgers, and they did that without Soto. So,
yeah.
and the Yankees put up a worse fight with Soto. So remove Soto from that Yankees team, they
Can
probably get
I?
rolled and put Soto on that Mets team. I'll tell you what, if Soto was in that Mets lineup last year, they might
Oh,
have
I
pulled that
know.
series out against the Dodgers. So
I know. It's funny you mentioned that. So I'm watching the World Series this year, and you and I are both rooting for the Dodgers, even though I hate the Dodgers. But it was like the
probably about the
lesser of
only
two
scenario
evil,
we could root for the Dodgers.
100%. And so I'm watching the Yankees and Soto comes up to bat. I'll never forget this. In my head, I'm going, oh, there's that cocky Soto again. That cocky Soto always messes things up. Oh my God, he's going to mess things up. I remember saying this when the Nationals were playing the Mets way back when. I remember, I mean, it's always that cocky Soto. And now that cocky Soto is on my team. I'm like, yes, there goes that cocky Soto. So, because Soto,
There goes our cocky
our
Soto.
cocky Soto. That's right. He has, I mean, you know this, but when Soto's in the box, man, he does this weird kind of stance. He
The
has
Soto
like, he does
shuffle.
this, the Soto shuffle. He has the way he holds his bat. It's different. And
That's because he commands the strike zone. That's his
he
strike zone.
does. And he's like, this is my fucking world. Like, I'm sorry, we don't curse,
Yeah,
but
it's
I
where
had
it's
to say
okay.
this. It's
This
like,
is a once in a lifetime signing. It's
this,
warranted.
he's like, this is my world. I own this box. And that's the way Soto is.
We're just living in it.
And he's like literally taunts the pitchers, which is the best thing I love about him. But yeah, yeah,
My
I'm
one of
so
my other
excited.
favorite pieces of media surrounding the Soto today was the guy who put out the video of Keith Hernandez calling all of Soto's homers against the Mets.
Hmm.
Imagine how he's gonna go when Soto does them for the Mets.
He's like something like, oh wow, that's a big one.
He said that might be the furthest one of them. He said that might be the furthest ball I've ever seen hit in this stadium.
I saw Keith Hernandez interview a couple of days ago, and he's absolutely thrilled that the Mets got Soto. He thought it's a huge move. He says it kind of reminds of. They asked him, "Well, can you think in your career of a time when the Mets did a move like that?" And he goes, "Yeah, it was probably when I brought Gary Carter on in the '80s, and they kind of finalized that '86 kind of lineup. They sent UB Brooks to Montreal. UB Brooks, of course, spent the rest of his career." Or most of his career I mean, the rest of that time, I don't know the specifics, but he was an Expo. That Expos kids was a team that became the Washington Nationals. It was in Montreal, yeah. But Gary Carter bringing one of the probably, I mean, him and Piazza, the best catchers the Mets have ever had, without a doubt. But um, yeah, I mean, there's others too, but you know what I'm saying. People are gonna say, "Oh no, Tim, what about the catcher?" I forget who caught in '69, but was it Gil Hodges? No, he was a manager. All right, well, anyway, I digress. But I'm saying that was that element in to really help propel, which Gary Carter did, the Mets to win in '86 against Boston. Oh, Boston. Did Boston really think they had a chance?
Hey, they we'll get to them later, but
Yeah.
they made a pretty big move themselves.
Did they? I didn't hear about it. Some picture or something. I don't know. But yeah, we'll talk about Boston. But yeah, that's so yeah. Thank you for bringing it up. And Charlie is the biggest Cubby fan I know, but he's a Mets friendly guy. I appreciate that. So yeah, and
It
I'm a
was a
cut.
fun ride to
And
they're a fun
I'm a
team last year. It's fun to be
I
in on the
agree.
ground floor and be the voice of reason in the early part of the season.
Absolutely, and you were. You absolutely. I remember you absolutely were, as usual. And I'm a Cubs friendly guy, and I'll be that voice of reason too. Although it's not necessary. I think you're pretty like, you're not that person who gets negative on your team. I mean, you're pretty, even in the worst of times, and that's the nature of a Cubs fan. I think. Is that eternal, well, for most of them, some of them maybe not, but that eternal optimism. And I don't know, we're going to talk Cubs in a little bit, but I feel pretty good about kind of what the wheels are cycling, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So that's first base. Woo, Juan Soto's not a first baseman, we'll talk about that.
No, but he
But
gets to first base very often.
very often.
Very often.
The stats are out of control. Yes, I
He
saw
is
them. It's
he is
like,
one of
whoa,
he is
his
one
on
of
base
four
percentage.
he is one of four players in the history of Major League Baseball to have 200 homers and 700 walks in their first 7 seasons. The first three are in the Hall of Fame.
He commands the strike zone. I mean, he's 100%. That's who he is. Oh yeah, he's absolutely a Hall of Famer. And now with him being on the Mets for 15 years, probably going to go into the Hall of Fame as a Met. I'm just saying.
No, probably about it, especially with him
Yeah.
already playing for three teams.
Yeah, of course. For those who don't know, you should know he started his career with the Washington Nationals. He
Won
was
a
on that
ring.
World Series winning team. He was on a team with Max Scherzer. Bryce Harper had already left the team to the Phillies. He did not get a ring at that time. And then he moved on to the Padres. And then the Padres last year famously sent him to the Yankees for a huge trade that I would say the Yankees lost in
Oh,
the end.
they did reach the World Series, but yeah, they gave up a
That's
lot to do so.
too bad they didn't win. And they kind of were trounced. I would say the
Yeah,
Mets performed better against the Dodgers than the Yankees did.
definitely.
I'll say that. So yeah. Speaking of exciting stuff, I want to say real quick before we move to second base, you have not watched House of Villains yet. You're gonna watch that. It is, and for those of you who haven't watched it, it's the penultimate show. Next week's the finale. It is awesome. That's all I'll say. No
Good to
spoilers,
know.
but you're gonna enjoy it.
Good to
Um,
hear.
we'll definitely talk about it next week on our wrap up of House of Villains and Survivor. But speaking of Survivor, oh. Oh, we get a treat. We have two people sent home in this episode. And it's not just,
2 hour part one of the finale.
it was amazing. It was
Oh my
epic. It
goodness.
was fantastic. So we first see the aftermath of Operation Italy in the beginning of the episode, and that itself is worth the price of admission. Um, what do you have to say about it?
Oh man. Well, we talked about Operation Italy a lot, and it was honestly interesting seeing the outsiders who weren't a part of the operation get the
The
details
reaction?
of everything.
I like the way it's kind of twisted a little bit, but you know what's interesting to me? There's a lot of talk about Andy flip flopping. Teeny, hello? Are you there?
Nah, don't know what's going on.
She flip flopped again. She wanted to go where the power was or where she perceived the power to be. And she perceived the power to be with Gwen, Sam, and Andy. And so she, early on in the episode, she's talking to them strategy. But, the silly thing about Survivor, when you're on the beach at night and you're talking and it's pitch black, you can't necessarily see a certain person creeping up behind you to listen to the entire conversation.
We have a Tony Valancho Spy Shack Part Two.
Rachel,
Rachel Lamont laying on the beach. Now,
that was epic,
when the
dude.
cameras are filming them, are they like, is it like infrared and they're not admitting light? Because like
Yeah, that's what she said.
when she was leaving that situation, I mean, it looked like she was like in eyesight of them.
She
So if
was
the
in
camera was
literally a
shining
bush
light,
right behind her, right
yeah,
behind
and
them.
when it like zoomed out when she was trying to leave, I mean, it looked like she was no more than 8, 9 feet away from them. Like, how did they not see her?
Well, the thing is, how did they not hear the cameraman rustling?
See, that's
Like,
what I want to know. Are
because
we
my
need
hearing is super.
we need some behind the scenes on that.
We do. Well, let's get Jeff Probst on. Jeff Probst, around the bases, come on our podcast. We'd like to talk to you about this.
Well, let's bring Rachel on. Hopefully, the winner.
Rachel. That's right. We're gonna talk about that and our predictions definitely. So they stupidly talk right into Rachel's ear, and Rachel goes off to Sue and says, "Oh, they said this and this and this." And Teeny's so we're gonna make Teeny think that she's still with us when she's not with us, and they go through this whole thing. And so then the key number one point comes up in this episode where Andy. You know what? He goes back to being a dummy. I'm gonna say that. I mean,
Yeah, he
dude.
flipped back.
And then he's like, "Well, I am my strategy and this to Rachel." And Rachel's all of a sudden going, "Rah, rah, rah, rah." Her alarms are going off, going, "Wait a minute. I've been thinking Sam was more of the threat this whole time, but it's not Sam that I really should be concerned about. It's
Andy.
Andy." Ooh, so you could see, and at that point when she said that, I'm like, oh, Andy's going home. I'm like, I don't see Andy. She's too smart. Like she knows. And she's absolutely right. I think Andy was the one to get out at that point. Because you know why? He flips back and forth. He has no loyalty to anybody. I mean, look, he started the game with Sam, and him and Sam were working together. He kind of leaped away from that. His loyalty is zero. Like, he has absolutely none. He flipped the entire game back
Yeah,
and
he was a
forth.
major floater.
So when Andy, of course, folks, if you haven't watched, Andy was the first voted out. Um, and Teeny voted for Sam, which was,
Now, hold on. How was he voted out?
oh, yes, yes.
Let-
Go ahead
Let's
and
let's
explain
let's
it
let's let's
because
not
this is
to pull.
beautiful.
First of all, and even rewind a little further. Community challenge, Genevieve
Oh, yeah.
wins.
Yes. And hard
So
fought.
now a key moment here is even further rewinding. We started with them talking about Operation Italy. In that conversation, they discuss Genevieve's fake idol, which only
Yeah.
further allows them to think it's real.
Which is going to go to part two of this episode. Yes, absolutely. So keep that in the back of your head.
So
Genevieve's
that's
fake
so it
out.
starts there. Then we skip to the immunity challenge. Genevieve wins another close battle. Really, only her and Rachel were close on the puzzle, and Genevieve won it by a good 5, 6 pieces. I mean, everybody else was miles behind again.
Hmm.
So Genevieve wins, which there were some kind of spoilers out there that thought they may have caught a shot of her in the sunset while walking. I'm really glad she ended up winning the first half immunity because had she not, it would have ruined the second half of it because we would have known, oh, well, then she must have won the second. So at least that happened. But once she
Yes.
won, which was the puzzle, then people started scrambling because they think, okay, well, she won and had the idol. So it could have gotten interesting in their mind. Like, what if she
Right.
needs to play her idol for some reason for Sam to keep them alive? Like, there was a lot of moving parts at that moment.
And they edited it to really make it look like Sam was going to be going home. And I feel like anytime they edit it that heavily, it's not going to be him. Like I almost felt like they're over pushing it to be Sam, and it's not going to be Sam.
Yeah,
And it
they
wasn't.
did. They did also show Rachel coming to terms with maybe Andy is. So they did kind of leave it in
They
that
did.
a little bit of doubt. But you're right. They did edit it pretty much showing like it was going to be Sam for a while.
That's when I kind of figured when she was talking like that, that's kind of when I figured it was going to be Andy. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I can't. She's finally coming to terms with the fact.
But
Um,
let's talk about how it got to that point because as we're sitting here and Genevieve wins, everybody wants Rachel out. So much so that they're all telling her all day, it's gonna be you, it's gonna be you, it's gonna be you.
I'm so sorry, but you know what? We have to vote you out.
So
And there was this
Rachel's
whole
going in there, or they're going in there thinking they've got Andy, Genevieve, Sam. That's 3 votes right there. So
and
Rachel's gonna
Genevieve.
need to do some magic here. So what does she do? First little piece of weaponry that she has, she stops Sam from even voting.
Yep.
Now we're down to only 2 votes for Rachel. Then what does she
Um,
do? The best part was how she did it. Right before
Yes,
the votes,
explain her
everybody's
speech.
looking smiling, everybody's happy, it's gonna happen. And then she says, Jeff, and everyone turns and looks at her like, what? What? The best part about attending your own funeral is knowing you're gonna wake up the next morning. And then she pulls out the idol. And then at that moment, there's a lot of people that are starting to get their stomach stirring a little bit. All of a
Now,
sudden, they know that all of Rachel's votes don't count. So who did they pick? They're sitting there, and first vote is
Andy.
Andy. All of a sudden, 13th person voted out Andy.
Andy. You know, I was thinking Charlie is a Rachel stan, and I'm like, I know at that moment you were like, yes, go. I know you. It's like
And
you're
no
like
one but Sue knew she had that. And got to give props to Sue for not blowing that up. She could have, but it wouldn't have really benefited Sue much because, at this point, Rachel's her last remaining ally. So,
before we get to the second part, can we talk about how I'm impressed that Sue, no one, not a soul knew Sue had an idol?
yeah.
Nobody, not even Rachel,
Nobody.
knew that Sue
That's
had an idol.
that that's what's saving her from second to last.
Yeah. Um,
Got that over Teeny.
so we have basically now the storyline kind of shifts a little bit to the frenemies, I would call them, right? Rachel and Guinevere, how they're both kind of like similar but like-minded opposites, and they both want each other out. And
Mhm.
I don't like I can see that to a point, but Guinevere certainly hasn't played the game that Rachel has. I mean, Genevieve. Why did I say Guinevere? Genevieve. Um, there's she. I think Genevieve literally last couple episodes. I think when she realized that she still has to build a social relationship, she started to turn it on a little bit.
Yeah, the episode where she basically talked about it and then went through the steps and realized it in real time.
So can we talk about how this was a funny segment, and I want to talk about this. So we have Teeny on a hammock, and Teeny is going through in her head every single time that Genevieve has lied to her throughout the season, and she's starting to go. Can we say that that Teeny has totally been oblivious to almost everything, basically?
Oh, not only that, but openly admitted it at Tribal.
100%, which is stupid because
Basically saying, I'm the worst. Don't vote for me.
Jerry, I don't want you to vote for me. And now even Saul's probably like, it's
Yeah.
that whole sequence when they're showing literally the clips of all of Genevieve and Teeny's interactions is awesome. Yeah, so Teeny is totally oblivious to everything. It's actually funny. I mean,
Openly admitted it at Tribal. Don't vote for me. I'm terrible.
that's the thing. You don't. I mean, at this point in the game, right? We're at the end game, basically. You want to show them why. I mean, Andy was doing that to a point, but you want to show them why you deserve to be the winner of Survivor. I don't think, by the way, speaking of this, and we'll continue this part. So we got Genevieve and kind of Rachel, and we know it's kind of coming to a head, but there's an important part that you mentioned earlier. The fact that Operation Italy produced a fake idol that Genevieve has. And so Sam, knowing what's happening, so wait, we go to immunity challenge for the second part, and who wins immunity? Of course,
Rachel.
Queen. Rachel wins again, her third
And this
immunity.
was one where, I mean, everybody dropped seven, eight, nine times. This was a really tough one.
It's a
And
balance
this
thing.
is one where you could have gone at a snail's pace and probably won. But everybody is so always so worried, oh no, they're at four, and everyone tries to rush to catch up and they keep dropping and dropping. It was a wild challenge.
And Genevieve was almost done, and she wasn't even near it, and it plopped. I was like, oh, oh,
And
um,
before they even went to immunity, one part that I want to bring up is they had to do what everyone has to do. It happens in a lot of seasons. You get someone like Rachel who's dominating and you desperately want to get her out. So what do you have to do? The final day, you have to follow her around and babysit her to make sure she doesn't win anything.
that was funny. So you literally have Genevieve on her tail.
And Genevieve said, like, I'm sorry I have to do this, but
I need to follow you. And she
and at this
does.
at this point, Rachel still does not know that the idol is not real. So she's
No.
saying to Genevieve, I can't let you find another one. You've already got one. And Genevieve's like trying not to break at that point. Then, yeah, then we have the immunity challenge, which Rachel wins. Then
So
back to
now it
Operation
sets us
Italy
up.
again. Exactly.
Yeah.
Because
So
no one wants to vote out Sue or Teeny because they know that they're not winning. So both of them are going to get carried to four. So that
so the
leaves Sam and Genevieve now having to break their alliance and go head to head.
so the obvious thing is we know that Genevieve has an idol, so we're gonna vote
So
Sam out. So Sam, realizing this scenario, is like, I'm gonna have to tell them. And so there's a deleted scene that you haven't seen. If you've seen it, it's on social media, where Sam sits Genevieve down and they have a conversation and and Sam goes, "It breaks my heart, but I'm gonna have to tell them the idol's fake." And Genevieve goes, "I understand. You have to do what you have to do." You have to save yourself. I get it. And it was actually a really cool conversation that I'm kind of sad that they left out of a 2 hour. They couldn't fit it into a 2 hour broadcast.
especially
Um,
with another two next week.
that to me, that was a little insane that they couldn't fit that in. I mean, I think it absolutely made sense to include. I mean, I don't know why they excluded it, but that's another story. So, and I think, that piece alone is a hint to me that Sam doesn't win the game. Because I feel like if Sam won the game, they would have made it to air. I feel like it would have been part of his storyline,
Yeah.
and that tells me. I
We'll do
mean,
predictions towards the end of the
yeah,
segment, but
okay, yeah.
we'll touch on that. We'll touch on that.
So, they Sam, of course, talks to them, and they at first, of course, they're like, "Well, how do we know we're telling the truth? Because of what happened in Operation Italy, they tried to split the votes." So, they're of course they don't believe him. So they're going back and forth. Should we believe him? Shouldn't we believe him? So Teeny, of course, has to be the one that kind of goes against the grain, and when they go to vote, she votes for Sam. Even Rachel votes for Genevieve to
Rachel and Sue both do.
right.
And then we also, as you brought up correctly, have our most anticlimactic idol play in maybe the history of Survivor, as not a single person knew Sue had the idol, and she was definitely not getting a single vote either way. But it was just fun that she got to hold on to that the whole time. And then they finally figure out that was the red paint one.
Yeah, they're like, oh, the red paint one, and they're like, oh, she has an idol. It was like, yeah, as you said, anticlimactic. It's like, oh, okay, and she didn't really need to use it. She just used it. I don't.
Yeah,
I'm like,
maybe she didn't want the souvenir, I guess.
I would want the souvenir. I mean,
Yeah,
speaking of souvenir, you saw Survivors giving away a bunch of them. I sent you the link. That's pretty
yep,
cool.
I did it. I did the QR code.
Absolutely. If you want to find out, Google it. I don't want the competition. I'm kidding. Um, so yeah, it was a great episode. Now we're down to our final four.
We are
We're
down
down
to
to
four.
we're
Now
down
let's get
to
now we can get into some predictions and some thoughts.
so
So you go first. Go ahead.
someone in the final four has to win immunity and basically doesn't have to participate in fire. So the last immunity challenge is coming up. And I'm going to be honest with you, my money is 100% on Rachel winning that immunity challenge. I mean, and it's a huge one too, because it really does booster the resume. I think Sam has a shot, depending on what it is. He's won some reward challenges. He has not won an immunity challenge. And even Sue possibly could win. I don't think Teeny's going to win anything. I think we're going to see Teeny at fire, and I don't think she's going to be successful. That's my prediction. Um,
I've got a couple hot takes and predictions as well.
okay. I, I,
You keep finishing, and then I'll go
yeah,
after
no, it's
you.
just real quick, real quick. So my final prediction is that Teeny will be the last person actually on a jury, and I think the final three are going to be Sue, Rachel, and Sam. And I think no one's going to vote for Sue. I think Sam might get one or two votes, and I think Rachel will win the game. All right, your turn.
I agree with Rachel winning. Here's what I have two things. At one point, I texted you. I've got an interesting theory
Oh
that I didn't want to
yes,
share yet. Here's my theory. If Rachel wins immunity, I think she should actually take Sam with her. And
I
here's
think you're
why.
right.
And here's why. I think Sam's the only person that has a chance to maybe upstage her, which, and again, I really think it's Rachel's game to lose. Like, I'd put her as a heavy favorite.
So are you saying because if Sam
I
wins a fire, that would kind of
It would give
upstage
him
her?
another piece on his resume. So I
Mm.
think if Rachel were to win and then take Sam, it's another instance of, hey, I brought you here. He can't further increase his game. Now, here's where I want to bring up one more thing. I think there's lots of scenarios to how it goes out. I think the one of the only scenarios in which Rachel does not win the game is this. This is one of the only ones I can see. And I know you're giving me that face now, but when you hear what I'm going to say, you might agree. This happened in one of the seasons where you probably didn't watch. You mentioned in the beginning, if you win immunity, you don't have to participate in fire. However, if Sam were to win immunity, I think Sam would go to fire himself against Rachel to knock her out. This is a scenario I can see. This has happened before. I shouldn't have spoiled it which season it was. So I'm not going to tell you who did it or what season in case you decide to go back and watch a few recent ones. But there was a season. Yeah, you see this? Now you see where
Oh
I'm
my
going.
God.
So there was a year where player B was not going to win at all. Player A had it run away. Player B won the last immunity, and decides the only way player A is going to lose this game is if I beat them in fire. Goes to fire, knocks them out, and then wins Survivor. So
Holy crap.
this is the one scenario I will leave out where you kept mentioning, well, maybe Sam's at it. I didn't want to jump in yet, but if Sam wins immunity, the best and all, I think because I well now let's it just depends on how much Sam thinks he can actually win the game. I think it's Rachel's game to lose. If Sam feels the same way, his best chance to win would be to pull off the immunity, and then he's going to have to go to fire and beat Rachel. Otherwise, I think Rachel wins no matter what. Rachel's going to beat if someone else wins and puts them in fire. Like maybe a miracle. What if Teeny or Sue win? Then they take each other, and then Rachel. The only way I see Sam winning is if he knocks out Rachel in fire. Otherwise, I
Which
think it's Shields.
to your point, I think almost everybody left thinks that it's Rachel's game to win. I really do. I even Sam, I think he
Mm-hmm.
knows, and I think
He
that
knows.
scenario,
He
and if
even said
he's
himself he's been trying to get her out since there were nine left.
and if he's a big Survivor fan, like I've heard, then he knows this season that you're talking about, and he probably
Definitely.
kind of has it in his head that maybe this is what I have to do. And he's a sports guy, so I mean, he's thinking the strategies in his head, I'm sure. Um, which would be epic. I mean, to have that, I mean, wow. And then if Rachel wins against Sam,
Then it was already over. Then it's over
yeah,
on top of over. If it's a final three of Rachel, Sue, and Teeny, I would put my life on a unanimous vote.
unanimous vote, 100%.
Unanimous.
Absolutely.
I still
So,
think, I still think, it could, I don't want to say Sam. A lot of people, if you look, a lot of people are arguing that Sam's game is closer to the Rachel's than a lot of people think.
no,
And the point people bring up is Rachel would have already been out if it wasn't for Saul. So that was a little bit of luck. And granted that I get that, I hear you, but you still can't take away her dominating after the fact. She's been way too dominant.
absolutely.
It's her game to
She
lose.
has.
So
So
if Sam pulls off immunity, his only path, in my opinion, is to beat her in fire, or he has to hope Teeny wins. Because the other thing I was going to bring up was if Sue somehow, not going to happen, but if Sue somehow wins in immunity, would she take Rachel because they're friends? Because Sue's not going to win regardless. So would she take Rachel as her ally because she's been pretty loyal? If she does, then Sam's in the same boat. If Sam beats Teeny in fire, that's not a big enough resume boost to beat Rachel, in my opinion. So I think his only way to win is if he somehow either Teeny wins and she puts Sam against Rachel, then he could win that way. Or if he wins and puts himself in there against Rachel. Otherwise, the way I see it is Rachel's game to lose. And I think a great tip in the cap is if Rachel wins immunity would be to pull Sam along because then
mhm.
hey, not only am I better than him, I just showed you why, and I'm not even going to give him a chance to further his game. So those are the two things that I wanted to bring up.
I think you're probably spot on. And I would be really interested to see if that happens, if Sam wins immunity and puts himself in fire against Rachel. I think that would be amazing TV. I will say, I think if Sam and Rachel are in the final two with somebody else, but insert Sue or Teeny, it's not a unanimous vote. I think Sam will get a couple of votes.
Yeah, maybe
Um,
like 7-2, 6-3, but it
right.
should still be pretty safely Rachel's.
If Rachel's in it with Teeny and Sue, like you said, it's absolutely unanimous, no doubt. If Sam is in if somehow magically Rachel is out and it's the three is Teeny, Sam, and Sue, Sam wins probably most of the votes. I don't think he
Oh,
gets a
it
unanimous
might be
too.
unanimous at that point. I don't even know
Maybe.
if I really don't see Teeny or Sue getting a vote unless someone really despises someone else. Like if you respect the game, that's the
I
thing.
don't think there's bad blood with Sam though, with
There's been
anybody.
a not we're so deep into Survivor, 47 seasons now, that there's not too many random people just like getting on Survivor. Most of the people know the show, they watch it, and you got to hope at least that they respect the game enough to truly vote for who deserves it, not who
Mhm.
their friend was. So I really don't see. I'm gonna go on a limb and say zero votes for Teeny or Sue, regardless. So the only way I think Rachel against no Sam unanimous, Sam against no Rachel unanimous. I'd be pretty surprised if it wasn't. So we'll see.
I think you're spot on. Speaking of real quick Survivor and people watching and coming on, Jesse Tannenbaum put out a TikTok today that they're going to stop casting for season 49 right after the new year. So if you're still wanting to go on Survivor, you have about 3 weeks left to put in your application. He said he's going to start the application process for seasons 51 and 52 in the late in spring summer, so or late summer actually. So I might do that. 51, who knows, you never know. Lose some weight, let's go. But get your application in, folks, if Survivor has been your dream. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Can you imagine me on Survivor? Oof.
That'd be amazing. That
Oh
would
my
be
God.
amazing.
Oh, that would be crazy. But yeah. So
You or Mike, one of you guys are gonna get on.
Mike needs to apply right now. Michael, come on, Michael. Um, yeah, shout out to our buddy Mike Evans in Ohio, who is our friend and fan. We love you, Mike, and apply.
And
Okay.
hopefully you've watched the finale by now. Oh,
Yeah, yeah. He said he didn't watch it yet. So, I mean, well, if he listens to this podcast, I'm hoping.
yeah, we're
Oh,
usually on the same wavelength because I wanted to share the deleted scene, but I wasn't sure if he had watched. So I asked, and then about an hour later, you sent me that link, and I said that's exactly why I had asked if he had watched yet, because that was the same link I
because
was gonna
as
say.
soon as I saw it, I'm like, Charlie has to see this. This is fucking great.
Yeah, that was. I love
Uh,
that behind the scenes stuff. So
Me too. I mean, I love the deleted. I'm the dude. I'm the nerd. When you buy the move back in the day when you used to buy the Blu-rays and you used to go to all the like deleted scenes, I used to always run them through. I love that stuff. All right, let's talk baseball. Let's continue our baseball conversation real quick. What's going on in Wrigleyville? What's happening in Cubbyland?
it was a very very interesting, wild winter meetings for the Cubs.
A
They're
lot of conversations happening.
the last few years they haven't really waded into the big free agency pool like they should as in a big market. But an interesting big name who is only has 1 year left of team control has emerged as a trade candidate. Yes, as if you're just listening, Tim mouthed the words Kyle Tucker, which I mean, when healthy, he's a top 10 player in MLB, and
Unbelievable.
the Cubs are a good match with Houston. So
Yeah, they're
fingers are
similar
crossed.
markets.
Fingers
Similar
are
markets.
crossed that sometime this weekend the Cubs can get something done. It would totally change the dynamics of the team and a lot of people's interest.
He is an incredible player. Is probably one of my favorites on the. I don't like the Astros, but I like Kyle Tucker. Um, who would the Cubs send to Houston in
So
exchange?
there's a lot of stuff out there, and some of the reports out there are outrageous. Let's be real. He's in the same situation last year as Juan Soto was. And Kyle Tucker's amazing, but Soto's
He's
in
not
another
Juan Soto.
Soto's in another stratosphere. Soto's in the Shohei. Shohei's in his own, and then Soto's the second tier in his own, and then everyone else is way below.
The only player coming up next year that can kind of get up in that tier is Vladimir Guerrero Jr.
And Kyle
That,
Tucker.
uh,
Yeah,
but
those two.
I would say Vladdy Jr. is a little
They're
higher on the
close.
list.
They're
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 close,
close.
but yeah, yeah. But yes, absolutely. So continue.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for interrupting
No,
you.
no, you're good.
What names were being brandished about?
There, so the John Heyman was reporting that Houston is asking
Hmm.
for Isak Paredes, Seiya Suzuki, and one of the Cubs' first round picks of the last 2 years. It's never going to happen. There's no
Never.
way the Cubs would do that.
Suzuki?
Nah. So, so the interesting part with Suzuki is he has a full no trade clause. The Cubs basically, in order to get creative and even bring in someone like Kyle Tucker, someone's going to have to move. They've got Bellinger, they've got Suzuki, Kyle Tucker. All three of them theoretically could play right field. They could DH. When Suzuki came over from Japan, he was a pretty solid defender in Japan. He won their equivalent of a Gold Glove a couple times. But in the majors, he's been very
Yep.
average, as we painfully witnessed in person in Atlanta, and a brutal play that we saw.
Oh, I remember that.
Now, where that why that's important right now is basically Suzuki and his agent have said he it's his strong preference to not DH. He wants to play the field. The best version of the Cubs, unfortunately, is with him not in right field. Currently, you'd put Bellinger in right, and he'd be the DH. They bring in Kyle Tucker, one of Bellinger or Tucker, or I'm sorry, one of Bellinger or Suzuki would have to go. So both they're quote unquote listening on everybody, but again, Suzuki has a full no trade clause, and his agent said that if he were signing as a free agent, he probably wouldn't pick somewhere that they would use him as a DH. So that's why his name is being thrown out there. Know that he's not going to go with Paredes. You're not going to get 2 years of Suzuki, 3 years of Paredes, and then 6 years of a first round prospect. It's just not going to happen. So the other team that's in on him is we've talked about already the Yankees. Lu, Luis Heel won AL Rookie of the Year. That's who Houston wants from them. The Yankees probably have a little PTSD from giving up
Michael King.
for Soto the year before.
Yep.
Well, they're probably not going to want to do that. And even if they do want to give up Heel, that's one player. Their farm system is nowhere near where the Cubs is. So here's my prediction is if he is moved, I do think the Cubs will get over the finish line. I think it's going to be something closer to this. I think Paredes will be in the deal. Houston loved him last year. They were the runners up to the Cubs at the trade deadline for him. I think Paredes is a perfect fit for that stadium. He's a dead pull hitter, fly ball hitter, Crawford boxes. He did 30 homers there in his sleep. It's such a short porch and left. I think Paredes will be the main piece. I think they'll get one of the Cubs' young controllable starters, whether that's Javier Assad or Wicks, maybe Wesneski if they prefer him, one of those guys. And then I think the remaining part of the deal will be either a slightly better outfielder. Maybe the Cubs will go as high as Owen Cassidy, the number two prospect. I don't think the Cubs will go that high. I'm thinking maybe more of a Alcantara, who's about the Cubs' fourth or fifth prospect. If they would rather have two more pieces instead of Alcantara, they go a little lower on the list, similar to what the Red Sox did in a trade we'll talk about later, where maybe they get two prospects in the Cubs 10 to 20 range, where I could see a guy like Canario, an outfielder, and then maybe another lower pitcher like Jackson Wiggins or Brandon Birdsell, something like that. So I think it's either going to be four total pieces with pieces 3 and 4 not in the Cubs top 10, or the third piece will be in the top 10 and it'll be a little better. That's where I'm thinking it's going to land, somewhere in the middle of what the reports have been. So we'll see. But I'm hoping
So
very optimistic.
you're feeling very good about Tucker right now.
I am, surprisingly. And I haven't had a good feeling about Cubs going on big names like that because they just haven't really wanted to get into the Steve Cohen Yankees range of spending. And a lot of people are mad about
I
that.
mean, they're a
The way I
mid-market
see it is
team.
if
I
you
can
can't win with a
understand.
$230 million payroll, like what are you doing? It's not like the Cubs have $100 million payroll. They're still spending. They're just trying to do a little smarter with how they spend it.
Dude, look at the Braves and the Rays. The Braves and the Rays are perfect examples of you don't have to have a huge payroll to have a successful team. I
Yep.
mean, neither team has a huge payroll. Braves are similar market to Houston also, and to Chicago. Um, yeah, I
Yeah, and,
mean,
and as for why Houston would themselves would want to trade a guy like Kyle Tucker, Houston has never been willing to spend that kind of money on a player themselves, and they've lost many of their own big free agents for nothing. Garrett Cole
Carlos
walked, they got
Correa,
nothing. Correa walked, they got nothing. Springer, they got nothing. So I
Bregman's
think
about to walk.
they're getting a little tired on that. So they've been listening on Tucker and Valdez, Framber, but it makes
Hmm.
more sense for them to trade Tucker because they get more MLB ready pieces and then maybe a prospect in addition. Still stay competitive.
I mean, getting Tucker is basically the Cubs' version of Soto and the Mets. I mean, it's
If the
as
Cubs got
close to
Tucker,
it.
it would open up a lot of possibilities for what they could do.
It would absolutely, and I think it would energize the team, and I think it would be a much needed. I think it'll also have a positive impact on the players that are on the team, like your Ian Haps and whatnot. I think it would be a really, it's a huge deal, and
My
I'm right there with
my
you, hoping.
my hope and my thinking is that in an ideal world, they pick up Tucker and then they are able to move Bellinger. And in a funny domino effect, the best fit at that point would probably be the Yankees for Bellinger. So beat we would beat them like you guys beat them for Soto. We would beat them for Tucker, which would then clear a path for Bellinger. Bellinger, frankly, makes more sense for the Yankees. Yankees could use help at any of the outfield positions and first base, and Bellinger can play great defense at all of those positions.
Yeah,
Bellinger's
he
also
was
a
first
lefty as
base.
well. Bellinger's swing would work well in Yankee Stadium. I actually think that that could be a match. So that's how I kind of feel the offseason's shaping up. Maybe we're lucky enough to snag Tucker, and if we do, I think Bellinger gets moved.
So speaking of Bellinger and the Yankees, why wouldn't the I mean, I don't know a lot about this. Why wouldn't the Yankees re-sign Anthony Rizzo? Like, what's that deal about?
Rizzo's getting a little older, doesn't put up the same offensive numbers. Actually, there were reports a few days ago that Rizzo was close to finalizing a deal with the Pirates, but
Hmm.
nothing has been said since. So I don't know if they're still working on some particulars or a physical. But Rizzo had an okay postseason, but for the most part, had another pretty not so great season overall.
So another thing I want to bring up to you too, and yeah, Rizzo was injured last year too. We must
Hmm.
say. So yeah, why not why not Bellinger and the Mets?
That could be a possibility. But
I
I,
hope
like
not.
you,
I want Alonso to come back.
I think they're gonna get Alonso.
I think so too.
Here's one thing that I will say, and you might not like this part.
Oh
So
God,
just
I'm
caveat
afraid.
that.
I'm afraid.
The
Okay, go
longer
ahead.
Pete stays on the open market, I think the worse for the Mets. And
Yep.
here's why. A team that could make a play for him, we're talking about right now. The
The
Cubs
Cubs.
haven't really spent at that level. But when guys fall below a certain point that they think is acceptable, the Cubs can end up jumping. Like, for example, Cody Bellinger. Bellinger was not a Cubs target at all. Bellinger's market did not really develop. And then the Cubs made an opportunistic 1 year deal. He had a great year. And then the same thing happened the next offseason. The Cubs weren't going to sign Bellinger. Didn't really have a good market. The Cubs found a 3 year pillow deal with opt outs, which to bring us full circle, Bellinger opted in, which I think the Cubs were not planning on. That's kind of why they put the Cubs in scramble mode. But theoretically, the Cubs signed Tucker, or sorry, trade for Tucker. They could make a play for Pete if he stays out there long. But here's where I think it won't happen. I
It's the
think
only
that,
team, by the way, that I could stomach him going to.
yeah, he better not go to the Yankees. No way.
If
I think
Pete's
the
gonna go
Yankees end up with
anywhere, it
Christian
has to be the
Walker.
Cubs. I mean,
I think the Yankees end up with Christian Walker. That's what I think. I think the
I think
Mets
so
end up with
too.
Alonso.
Yeah, I think so too.
We've
I
kind of
think.
leaked into our last topic of some free agent predictions. We kind of leaked it in, so we can kind
All
of
right, yeah.
bridge the
But
gap here. But
so
I
real
do
quick
think that
before we get into that, can we talk about Boston?
that will be part of fourth
Oh,
base of
okay.
home plate. Boston, let's just jump into it. Boston made a big move.
Oh, they did, and I was so angry. Even though I got Soto.
Garrett
Man,
Crochet
dude.
traded his White Sox for Red Sox.
He did. Garrett Crochet is going to be a Red Sox, and in return, the Boston Red
Pretty
Sox sent
pretty
the
big
White
package.
Sox.
A
Yeah,
pretty big package. Now, from Boston's
pretty,
perspective,
pretty big.
Boston's perspective, they got to hold on to their number one and two prospects. So they could think it's a win, but they gave up back-to-back first-round picks. Both guys are supposed to be very good. Kyle Teal, fantastic young catcher. He's a guy the Cubs have liked for a while too. Then they also gave up their first-round pick in the most recent draft, number 12 overall, a young outfielder who is fantastic. And then they also gave up their number 11 and 14th ranked prospects, depending on where you look. So that's a Boston's got a pretty had a pretty highly regarded farm, but when you trade for your top 14, you're gonna tumble a few spots.
Well, now they have a pretty highly regarded pitcher.
They do, they do, and they better re-sign him because 2 years of him, if he leaves after 2 years somehow, they're gonna regret that deal in the long run. But I do think that they work out an extension there.
Yeah, I think so too. Of course, the Mets were in the running for Garrett Crochet, and I was hoping and praying that because honestly, as great as Soto is, we need pitching and we need pitching badly. And he would have fit in nicely. But honestly, I don't think that's going back to the Mets real quick because it's on subject. I don't think that's within Stearns's kind of way he works with pitchers. I
I
think
think he saw the
Stearns
price.
yeah, and he's more of the, well, we can craft it. We can, and the Mets have a great pitching staff, so I can kind of see why they're. I mean, look what they
And
did with Minea
Steve
and
Cohen has a
Severino.
big wallet.
Yes,
Let's
he
not
does.
forget that there's a number of great free agent pitchers still available, a ton of them.
This,
And the Mets have already added two guys to their rotation. So,
the silly things I saw on Twitter. I mean, like, Jet Williams and Louis Angel Acuna for Crochet. I was like, no,
it would have been
no,
those two plus two more.
hell no,
Yeah, see,
hell
that's
no.
that's where Stern saw,
That's
hey,
where, yeah,
I
no.
I can get Crochet and we can give up four top 12-ish 11 prospects. Not worth it. Or hey, there's all these other guys available we can just sign for money. And Steve's got the money.
Dude, Acuna is going to be a superstar like his brother. I have 100% believe that. I also think Jet Williams is going to be a superstar. Yeah, I no, no. I mean, you want to
Yeah.
talk about Kevin Parada? You can have Kevin Parada. He did not
If
do
the
well
Mets are going
last
to
year.
make an impact trade, one of those guys is going to have to go, and they don't want
Oh
to do
yeah,
that. That's why I think
no.
they sign a couple more. And they've already, I mean, we've the Mets rotation's
They're going
already
to sign Minea. They're going to sign Minea. I'm pretty sure of that.
he could be
I,
if you pull up MLB.com, there an article right now shows some of the best remaining free agents with some predictions. Mania is the last guy listed on the page. You want to know who they pick him for?
who?
The Cubs.
Hmm. Why the Cubs over the Mets though?
I think they think that Mania after I think they think the Mets aren't going to go to that price on a starter. I don't know if the Cubs will either, to be honest. Mania's, I mean, look what some of these other guys just got.
Mania fit in really well with the team last year. I
They
think
do
they
have
would
a
pay for
very
him.
interesting prediction for the Mets within that article, though. One
What?
that
Who?
I think you'd be very happy over.
Who?
They have a former Marlin who was traded last year and is arguably the number one relief pitcher on the market.
Who?
He's a southpaw.
That
He
doesn't
was
help me.
traded to San Diego at the deadline last year.
Oh, he was traded with the Luis Arias trade.
That was
Oh,
Araz was a couple seasons ago.
oh, all right.
This
See,
was at
that's
the
where.
deadline.
Who? I forget.
Tanner Scott.
Oh, Tanner Scott. Interesting.
They have him picked as the Mets on their article. So that would be he's another free agent who is getting a lot of teams interested, and
I
he
would
could be
rather have
great.
Manea back, but yeah. Um, yeah.
They also have Pete Alonso to the Mets as well. So
Hey, are they gonna have Sandy Alcantara to the Mets next year? Maybe.
is he a free agent next year? Very well could
I
be.
don't know. He's coming off of Tommy John. No, he signed a long term. The Marlins would have to trade him, which Marlins basically. Let's talk real quick about the Marlins have basically they just traded away Michael Berger. like Michael Berger, for those of you who don't know, he's not necessarily a superstar, folks. I will say that. But on the Marlins, he was their superstar. Literally just gave Charlie in August the Michael Berger bobblehead, which is usually the kiss of death. And sure enough, Michael Berger is in Houston, Astros, right? I think it was.
No, Texas,
Oh,
Texas.
I knew it was somewhere in Texas, the Rangers. But Michael Berger is a Ranger, and that is, if you know anything about the Miami Marlins, they Kim Ng left, and this owner, who I've talked about on this podcast before, is cheap as anything and literally has given away almost everybody. They got the seventh pick, I think, in the draft, and I said something along the lines of they're going to trade them away for a pack of peanuts. I mean, that's the Mets. That's what they're going to do. And you know what? This is historically. I'll tell you, I've been a Mets. I've been a Marlins fan. I'm a Mets fan and a Marlins fan. Yes, folks, I know that's crazy. National League East. I don't know what to tell you. I lived in Miami and Fort Lauderdale since 1991. The Marlins started in 94. So I was there in the beginning with the Marlins. And as a Met fan, I was rooting for a new team also. And so as the Florida Marlins, I've been a fan since all this time. And the history of what this franchise has gone through from 94 on, when we won the World Series in 97, Wayne Huizenga, who owned the team at the time, basically sold everyone off in 98. Marlins then go to the World Series again in 2003. We beat the Yankees. And again, Wayne Huizenga sells off the team. And including in that team and that sell off was none other than Miguel Cabrera, who, hello. I mean, who? Oh yeah, and then Erica just reminded me, most recently after 2017, the Marlins got rid of Stanton and
Giancarlo.
Yelich and
Yeah.
Giancarlo and almost every superstar that was on Marcelo Zuna, who's now
Arise.
the right. I mean, look at that team that was. I mean, Ichiro was on the team at the time. Even I mean, it was an amazing team, this is right after Fernandez passed away in that boating accident, and her it just it's the Marlins fans know nothing but strife. This team has continuously done this to them. And so a couple of years ago, Bruce Sherman buys the team along with his partner, Derek Jeter, right? And it's a whole big giant shebang, big huge thing. Oh, J-Lo was going to buy the team. There's a whole bunch of things going on. And J-Lo was going to buy the Mets at one point before Steve Cohen. God help me. Thank God she didn't. But, he bought the team, right? And it was this whole big deal. Oh, Derek Jeter's going to be the president of baseball operations, and Derek Jeter leaves the team. I mean, it's like he saw the writing on the wall. These some of the smaller market teams, unlike the Rays and other teams, basically use the baseball as a factory of this, and they get a share of the larger of the market of the broadcasting, and that's what they make their money on. It's really sad. And if
Yeah.
you
And
go to Marlins
there's a
Park,
rule that they have to spend X amount of that. And there's rumors that Oakland is being more aggressive this offseason because they were worried they were going to get dinged for not increasing their payroll, being a big revenue sharing receiving team. And they signed Severino for 67 million. So far,
which
early
was an
indications,
overpay,
it is.
100%
I mean,
overpay.
look at the price. The price of pitching is outrageous right now. So
Yeah. But I say it all that to say, you go to Lone Depot Park, which is where the Marlins play, and it's such a travesty to see what they have done to this team, and the experience is nothing like going to Wrigley. And I'm sorry to get off on a tangent, but I think it's important to know when you're talking about teams that are spending money, you talk about the teams that aren't spending money, that aren't doing anything, and you look at the Marlins, which makes me sad because look at the White Sox. At least the White Sox, I mean, as bad as they were last year, are making moves to do something, right? They're trying to build something.
yeah,
The Marlins,
the worst
nothing.
team in the history of professional sports traded away their best pitcher.
Yeah, which is crazy. But sometimes you got to make big
Are
moves
they
like
going to
that in
break
order
their
to
own
change
record
things
next
up.
year? You got to crack a few eggs to make an omelet. Is that what the expression?
Wait, what's going on? You don't like the Chicago White Sox, Charlie? What?
Oh no, I nothing again. I'm just pointing out a fact that they traded their highest WAR player in a season that they broke the record for futility. So I don't know how
It
much
makes
they're
no
looking up
logical
there,
sense.
but
It
hey,
makes zero
their
logical sense.
farm is looking really nice all of a sudden, adding two more top 100 guys to a farm that's about to break out.
Well, listen, dude, that those are the kind of moves the Mets made last year. You remember the offseason, they built up their farm. You know, we got Acuna and we got Williams, and there were moves that we made, and people at
Yeah,
the time
you
were
you
like,
got to do it. You got the same. The Cubs did the same
gotta
thing.
water the plants.
Cubs did the same thing. You've got one of theirs is a budding star in the league. A couple are hopefully going to graduate this year into the majors. So should be a fun year. The offseason should keep going. We still got a long way to go. So
So let's make some predictions. What are some of your
let's
predictions?
make a few predictions. I do think the Mets are nowhere near done. I do think they get Pete. And even though MLB.com thinks it, I think actually the Mets probably end up with Mania themselves. If
I agree.
I think those are two big moves, and I also think they're going to sign a couple relievers. So I mean, if he's truly, I mean, if you think about it, the Mets even after signing Soto are still like 40 to 60 million below where they were last year payroll. So I mean, if as long as Steve's comfortable, I mean, they're nowhere near done. So
Now, if
maybe if
they,
they can find a partner for Starling Marte, even if
yeah,
the Mets eat, say, 3, 4 million of that themselves, that only further increases what they can spend.
I would be
I mean,
fine with Marte going, honestly, because he's been
at
very
this
hit
point,
or
he's a fourth
miss.
or a fifth outfielder at most, so you
Yeah.
might as well.
He's been very
It'd be
hit
an
or miss and
expensive bench
injured.
piece.
Yeah, he's been injured. I mean, there's a lot with Marte that has kind of gone on with.
I
I
saw
mean,
an
he was
interesting
great.
take on if whether or not they could match up with the Pirates on one of those pitchers. Then let's say the Mets throw Marte and a
I
prospect. The
saw that too.
Pirates get Marte full circle. He started there. He'd probably be fine going to a place he's pretty well loved. They get a little more offense and the prospect, and they throw him a pitcher. Like that could be a good fit.
I think so too. I could see that happening. I think if for whatever reason, the Mets don't get Alonso, I kind of see something in the lines of putting Vientos at first base and bringing on a third experienced third baseman, who
There's some
in
nice guys on the trade market there too.
Alex Bregman. Um,
Bregman's a free agent, but some of the third basemen being listed in trades are Eugenio Suarez, Alec Boehm. There's some decent
Bohm,
ones. And
Bohm would be
Arenado. I know
interesting.
you guys don't want him, but he's out
I
there too. His glove's
I
still
don't.
pretty good.
No, I don't want Arenado. I'm sorry. He's
Yeah,
on. No, we don't want that. No. But Baum, Al, isn't he a Philly?
he is a Philly. So
Why would the Phillies trade
the
him
he's supposedly a guy
to
that
us?
he's the guy being named if the Phillies, which God forbid, if the Phillies end up pulling off a miracle for Tucker, Boehm's name was one of the main pieces there too, because Houston might be losing Bregman themselves.
But I don't see the Phillies trading with the Mets.
No, they
I don't.
won't. They won't. I
Yeah,
was just listening to the third basemen that are
I
listed
gotcha.
on the trade market. Yeah, the Mets don't line up there as in a division trade, but he is one of the third basemen on the market. So if he goes to one of the teams needing, eliminates another team. Once one team trades for Bohm, there's less teams for Nolan and Eugenio. Eugenio could be a good fit for the Mets. He still hits a lot of homers and he's got a
I
decent
would.
glove.
I would prefer them to pay for Alex Bregman than any of the ones that you suggested, to be
Yeah.
honest with you. I
The
don't.
downside with Bregman is they'd have to give up more draft picks because
Yeah,
he's got the QO tagged.
yeah. I mean, they had to give up draft picks with Soto, right?
Right, exactly. So it
Yeah,
gets worse on the second time you do it, is all. They could do
yeah,
it. They're not afraid to do it, but they could find a better option without having to lose on two more picks. So we'll see.
yeah. And then it kind of, but doesn't it kind of even out if Alonso signs somewhere else though?
If
Because then,
Alonso signed somewhere else, then
yeah,
they'd get a pick back. But in these scenarios, they could bring Alonso back themselves.
yeah. I think honestly, I think it would be very bad for the organization not to bring Alonso back. And I'm not talking. I'm talking more in the heart of fans. I mean, overwhelmingly, there was a survey I saw on Twitter today that said, it listed a bunch of people and which two would you bring back? And overwhelmingly, it was Alonso and Manea. Alonso and Manea. It
Yeah.
was 100%. And the fans are very emotionally attached to Pete. More, I've been, but I think a lot of this is recent because of what he did in the postseason. So I'd be surprised. I mean, I think they're just trying to make something that works for him,
Yeah,
and but
yeah.
I truly
I
think he's
think
coming
ultimately
back.
they get something done.
Yeah, I think so too.
Polar bear
Hopefully,
belongs there.
hopefully sooner than later, though. I mean,
Yeah,
hopefully by January. I don't want this lingering on into spring. That's
definitely
not
don't want
good.
it lingering.
No, not good.
Mm,
Uh, have memories of Michael Conforto and not happening, and that
There's
was
a couple other big free agents out there that we haven't touched on before we
sure.
wrap up. Corbin Burns still out there,
Oh,
best starting
pitcher.
pitcher by a mile.
Yep.
Now, I'm going to throw out a prediction. Might sound a little weird, but there's a team that has a lot of money to spend and has missed on a few guys. They want to spend that money somewhere. I think
The
they could.
Dodgers.
No, Dodgers have spent more money than who knows, other than the Mets. Dodgers, I think, mostly are done in the big time market of pitching. They could still get some other guys, but
You think
I
they
don't think
re-signed Walker Bueller?
they could. Bueller actually, I think, could be an interesting. Bueller's
Mets.
like Mets could be. I've heard the Cubs mentioned as a fall for him too. Bueller's interesting. I think Toronto is getting somebody
Oh, the
big.
Blue Jays.
If it's not Burns, maybe it's Santander. But I think the Blue Jays end up with a big free agent splash. And even though they just spent $182 million on Willie Adames, well, I heard a lot of talk about the Giants wanting to make another splash. I could see Burns
Hmm.
going to San Francisco or Toronto.
And they're
I
not
think
afraid to
Boston was
spend
in there,
money.
but I don't think they want to spend that money. They just traded for Crochet. The Yankees spent it on Freed. I think San Francisco and Toronto are interesting to watch.
The Yankees still have to has holes to fill at first, obviously. So we talked about that. So
Yeah,
I
I think
think
the
you're
Christian
right.
Walker goes to the Yankees. That's what I think.
Yeah.
I think Alonso to
Um,
the Mets, Walker there. How about Bregman? Where do you think Bregman's going to go?
uh, um, I think it depends. You don't think he may go back to Houston?
He could. I just don't know if how much he'd have to leave on the table to do so. What I've been hearing is he wants a contract that starts with 200 or more total, and I just don't think Houston's going to go there. From what I've heard,
No.
Houston's offer on the table is 6 for 156, which is
Mm-mm.
exactly 26 a year. That's a big gap between 200 and 156. It's a big gap. That's seven and a quarter a year extra. I mean, maybe they can
There's
meet in the middle, 175, 180, but Bregman's going to have to leave money on the table. And if he doesn't want to do that,
there's not
Yankees
a
are a
lot of
fit.
teams
I've heard
that
an interesting team on him as well. The Tigers, I've heard, are in on Bregman, which would be
they would spend that
interesting.
money.
They did on Javi, but that one did not work out.
No, it did not.
So we'll
It
see.
did
They could have
not.
some PTSD on that.
That Javi Baez. Ooh. I was like, when he left the Mets at first, I was like, oh, I can't believe he didn't sign with them. But I'm like, oh, thank God.
Another pretty good starter out there we haven't mentioned. Speaking of the Tigers, speaking of the Dodgers, Jack Flaherty. He's also still out there.
Oh,
He
I've
could
heard
be a
him with the
Met.
Mets.
He
I've
could be
heard
a Met.
him. He's great. Former Cardinal.
Nice. It's
Um,
nice when you have Uncle Steve's wallet and you can be in on everybody. One other big name we haven't touched on, a couple other smaller ones, but one other big name is Teoscar Hernandez, also still out there.
Yeah, there was before they signed Soto, there were rumblings with the Mets possibly for Teoscar. There's rumblings about the Dodgers re-signing him.
Sounds like
Uh,
he does not want to take a pay cut again, which understandably he had a
but
monster year.
he prefers to go back to the Dodgers, is what I understand.
That's
But
what
he
I hear
wants
as well. I just don't think that they're going to go to what he wants. So another situation where will he leave money on the table? And I don't think he will because he just did that last year.
Yeah, and I don't think with all the buzz on Soto getting paid as much as Soto got paid, although there's no comparison, I don't think a lot of players are going to want to leave money on the table if
Yeah.
he's getting paid.
So Soto made a lot of future players a lot of future dollars.
Especially one right at the top of my head, and I said it before, Vladdy Jr. is going
Yeah,
to make
Vladdy
big
Jr. and
money.
Kyle Tucker are going to
Yep.
be the next two 300 plus $1 million guys, I think. I think both of them get there.
Hmm. Absolutely. Alonzo, not
No.
that much.
I
But
think
listen,
Alonso could get around 150,
I'm
maybe
thinking
175.
165. Yeah, I
Yeah,
was thinking around that. I
I
mean,
think
he's
150 is a good floor for him.
You have to look, well, as you know, you have to look at the market per position, and the first base market is a different animal. I mean, you look, Goldschmidt is out there too. We didn't talk about Paul Goldschmidt.
Yeah,
These
he's off a
first
pretty down year. He's going to get a pillow to
very,
pillow deal. I've seen the Tigers, another team possible for him.
hmm but
You
yeah,
you know who else is going to end up with another random guy? We're going to be like, wow, is going to be Oakland, or I should say Sacramento.
like Paul Goldschmidt.
He exactly where I was going. He could be a guy that could go there.
Are they going to call themselves? I asked you this question last week. Are they going to call themselves the Sacramento A's or what's happening?
It's to be determined. We'll see.
They're playing in such a. I mean, they went from a dump to a dump, basically. If
Yeah.
you've seen the stadium, it's not good.
The still images of Severino looking like
So
flabbergasted, and all the
sad.
comments were Severino realizing this is where he signed to play. Yeah.
Yeah, for let me just frame this real quick, folks. And what Charlie's talking about, Luis Severino basically only played in New York. He played for the Yankees and the Mets. So to go from New York to Hodgepodge, Sacramento, which is
Yeah.
Sacramento's the capital of California, isn't it? I think it's the state capital.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So should be interesting.
Oh, dude. Yeah, we're gonna have a lot in the next couple of weeks, folks. We're gonna be talking a lot about this, of course. Anything else you want to add, buddy?
No, I think we gave a pretty action packed, information packed episode.
Thorough.
Hopefully we hit on some more of the predictions. We've been on kind of a roll lately, so
We have. I mean, let's go. I mean, I love it. And hopefully a lot like we talked about today, a lot more action for the Mets and the Cubs. And we
and yeah,
see
I'm hoping to be as happy next week as you
Kyle
are this
Tucker.
week. Fingers crossed.
I'm
It's about time we
crossing.
get a star back in Chicago.
Chicago needs a
Bona star.
break. Chicago needs a break.
Been doing some losing lately.
Yeah, we won't talk about the Bears. That's another story.
This has been around the bases.
There you go. This has been Around the Bases, a pop culture and sports podcast with your host.
Charlie Seymour.
And I'm Tim Sternberg. Until next week, have a great week, everybody. Bye.
Juan Soto's a Met.
Juan Soto is a Met. Bye, everybody.